What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds, where we dive into the strange, the unexplained, and the downright unbelievable. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, and today we're going to take a little stroll off the beaten path. Actually, let's be honest. We're diving headfirst into the thick of the woods. No trails, no maps. Because today, my friends, we're talking cryptids. But not just any cryptids. We're exploring the shadowy, lesser-known creatures that lurk in the corners of American folklore. Now, you might be thinking, Bennett, we all know about Bigfoot, we get it. Sasquatch is the king of cryptids. And sure, we love our big, hairy friend. But today, we're setting our sights on his more mysterious, less famous cousins. Think of this as the cryptid version of those bands that are just a little too underground for the mainstream, except, potentially real. I'm talking about the Mothman of West Virginia, the Jersey Devil haunting the Pine Barrens, and the Lizard Man of Scape or Swamp in South Carolina. Yeah, you heard me, Lizard Man. But here's the twist, folks. Recent reports are suggesting these cryptids aren't just staying in the realm of legend. Sightings are on the rise, and in some cases there's actual government paperwork that might point to something bigger going on. What if these creatures aren't just figments of our collective imaginations? What if they've been here all along and someone, the government, doesn't want us to know? So buckle up, because today we're diving into the world of America's hidden cryptids, exploring their myths, dissecting modern-day sightings, and asking the big questions, like, why are these creatures being kept in the shadows? Are we being purposefully misled? And most importantly, what does all of this mean for you and me? Trust me, you're not going to want to miss this one. Start by expanding our cryptid horizons a little bit. Now, I know Bigfoot, aka Sasquatch, the hairy Houdini of the forest, has become the poster child of cryptid culture in America. The guy's got brand recognition, But Bigfoot isn't the only mysterious creature lurking in the backwoods of the U.S. In fact, there's a whole zoo of cryptids that have been spotted all over the country, each with its own unique brand of weirdness. Take the Mothman, for example. This bad boy comes from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and first made headlines in the 1960s. You've made it big when the locals are both terrified of you and name a festival after you. The Mothman is described as a large winged humanoid with glowing red eyes that looks like it skipped out on its cameo in a low-budget horror flick. The legend goes that the Mothman appeared in Point Pleasant just before the Silver Bridge collapsed in 1967, killing 46 people. Some believe he was there to warn folks about the disaster. Others think he caused it. Either way, you have to admit, that's a lot of responsibility for one cryptid to carry. Then there's the Jersey Devil. You thought New Jersey was all about diners and turnpikes? Think again. This beast is said to haunt the Pine Barrens, a stretch of forest that covers 7 counties in southern Jersey. The creature itself is a bit of a Frankenstein's monster, part kangaroo, part bat, part goat, and all-around nightmare fuel. Legend has it that the Jersey Devil was born as the 13th child of a woman named Mother Leeds. Yeah, unlucky number 13. She cursed him in a fit of rage, and instead of a regular baby, she gave birth to this winged monstrosity. Let's not forget the Lizard Man of Scape or Swamp in South Carolina. I mean, it's right there in the name. He's part lizard, part man, and all swamp. First sighted in the 1980s, The lizard man was blamed for attacking cars, yep, cars, and leaving massive footprints around the area. Locals reported seeing a 7-foot-tall creature with green, scaly skin and red eyes. Whether he's the product of some mutant lab experiment gone wrong or just a guy in a really convincing suit, who knows? But he's definitely earned his place in the Cryptid Hall of Fame. Now, these creatures might seem like tabloid material, something you'd laugh about over a campfire or seize in one of those grainy black and white photos next to a headline that reads, "Local man claims alien stole his lawnmower." But what if these stories are more than just tall tales? What if scattered across America, we have a whole pantheon of cryptids that have been lurking just out of sight for centuries, making themselves known only to a select few who happen to be in the wrong place at the right time? But here's where it gets even more interesting. In recent years, sightings of these lesser-known cryptids have been on the rise. We're not just talking about a couple of bored teenagers pranking their neighbors. We're talking about multiple witnesses, credible accounts, and even some physical evidence. Could it be that these creatures aren't just local legends anymore? Are they stepping out of the shadows because something is pushing them to the forefront? Or maybe, just maybe, they've always been here and we're finally starting to notice. We're going to unpack all of that today, but first, let's lay down the foundation of what we know about these cryptids. While each of these creatures has its own distinct lore, they share one key feature. They are deeply rooted in the areas they come from. Mothman is as much a part of West Virginia as the Appalachian Mountains. The Jersey Devil is woven into the folklore of New Jersey, and the Lizard Man is a swamp icon in South Carolina. These creatures aren't just figments of imagination. They are cultural cornerstones for the communities that fear them, respect them, or, let's be honest, make money off them through tourism. But as we're about to see, the folklore might just be the tip of the iceberg, because there's something bigger at play here, something that's starting to break through into the mainstream, and it's not just the cryptids that are stepping into the light. Now that we've dipped our toes into the murky waters of American cryptids, it's time to fast forward to today, because these creatures aren't just ancient folklore anymore. Nope, it seems like they've been stretching their legs, wings, and scales in recent years, making themselves known in ways that are hard to ignore. We're talking modern-day sightings, folks. Some of these reports are as fresh as yesterday's news, and the question is, why now? Let's kick it off with the Mothman, who has had something of a comeback tour. For a cryptid that hasn't officially been sighted en masse since the 60s, the Mothman has recently been busy flapping around Chicago of all places. That's right. The Windy City has become the latest hotspot for this red-eyed winged creature. Since 2017, there have been dozens of reports from residents claiming to have seen the Mothman flying over the city's skyline, perching on buildings, or swooping low over Lake Michigan. One witness even described it as a large bat-like creature with red eyes, while another said it had a wingspan of at least 10 feet. Now, these reports might seem easy to dismiss if it were just a couple of people, but when you've got consistent sightings over the span of months, you start to wonder if there's something more to it. Could the Mothman have migrated from West Virginia to Chicago for some reason? Is it drawn to densely populated areas? And let's not forget the original Mothman sightings were often linked to impending disasters. So, is this a warning for something big on the horizon? Next up, let's talk about the Jersey Devil. This guy hasn't been content just haunting the Pine Barrens anymore. Oh no, He's been spotted at the edges of suburban neighborhoods, near highways, and even by people driving down the Jersey Turnpike late at night. There was one notable sighting in 2015 when a man in Galloway Township claimed he saw what looked like a kangaroo with wings flying across the road in front of his car. He even snapped a blurry photo of it because, of course, cryptid photos are always blurry. Skeptics were quick to cry foul, saying it was probably just a bird or some sort of trick of the light. But the guy swore up and down that he saw the Jersey Devil. And let's be real, kangaroos aren't exactly known for their New Jersey residency. Now, the lizard man of Scape or Swamp, he's been a little quieter, but not entirely out of the picture. The last big surge of sightings came in 2015, when multiple people reported seeing a strange, scaly creature roaming around the swamp. One woman even said she saw the lizard man near a church, of all places, prompting her to take a quick snap with her phone. The photo predictably is blurry, but you can make out what looks like a tall humanoid figure with greenish skin standing by the edge of the woods. Is it the lizard man? Maybe. Or maybe it's just someone who really needs to moisturize. What's interesting, though, is that these sightings don't just come from your typical cryptid enthusiasts, people who are out in the woods actively hunting for strange creatures. We're talking about regular folks here, commuters, families, joggers, and people walking their dogs. These are ordinary people who had no intention of running into the strange and unexplained on their way to work or while out for an evening stroll, and that makes the sightings all the more compelling. But here's where it gets even weirder. We've seen a steady increase in cryptid reports across the country in the last decade. Whether it's the Mothman, the Jersey Devil, or even the more obscure creatures like the Ozark Howler or the Beast of Bray Road, sightings are on the rise. Is it just a case of more people paying attention thanks to the internet and social media, or is there something else going on here? One theory is that cryptids might be reacting to environmental changes. As humans expand into more rural and undeveloped areas, we're pushing into territory that could have been their home for centuries. Think about it. Deforestation, urban sprawl, and climate change are affecting ecosystems all over the country. Animals that used to be hidden in the deepest parts of forests or swamps are now being forced closer to civilization. And if cryptids are real, they could be getting caught in the crossfire. Another theory is that the rise in sightings has something to do with our collective subconscious. The world has gotten a lot stranger in the last few years. Pandemics, political upheaval, climate crises, and many believe that the veil between our world and the unknown is thinning. People are more open to the idea that there's something out there, something unexplained, and maybe that belief is helping us see what's been there all along. Of course, there's the more cynical take, too. With the explosion of social media, it's easier than ever to fake a sighting, post a blurry picture, and let it go viral. And sure, some of these sightings might just be attention seekers looking for their 15 minutes of fame, but the sheer number of reports from credible sources makes it hard to write off all of these encounters as hoaxes. The big question is, why now? Why are we seeing an uptick in cryptid sightings in the 21st century? Are these creatures coming out of hiding because something is changing in the environment? Or is there a larger, more coordinated effort to keep these creatures in the shadows, away from the public eye? Which brings us to an even bigger question. Could some of these sightings actually be real? What if the Mothman is more than just a creepy urban legend? What if the Jersey Devil really is stalking the Pine Barrens and the Lizard Man is hanging out in the swamps of South Carolina just waiting for someone to cross his path? But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's shift gears a bit, because believe it or not, there are some hints that these cryptids might not just be hiding on their own. Someone or something might be helping to keep them hidden. We've talked about the legends and modern sightings of these cryptids, but here's where things start to get really interesting. You might think, cryptids are just fun stories, right? Who cares if people see weird creatures now and then? Well, apparently someone cares a lot. In fact, there's growing evidence that certain government agencies might be more involved in the cryptid world than we ever imagined. Let's start with the idea that governments have been known to suppress information that they deem too sensitive for the general public. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to recognize that. Look at the way UFOs, or UAPs as they're called now, were treated for decades. It was only recently that the Pentagon admitted, hey, yeah, we've been tracking unidentified flying objects for years, and we still don't know what they are. If that's possible with something as high profile as UFOs, what makes cryptids any different? There's a theory that the government, or at least certain branches of it, has been actively working to cover up cryptid sightings for decades. Why? Well, think about it. If people started to believe that these creatures were real, it could cause all kinds of social and economic upheaval. Imagine what would happen if suddenly we had to face the reality that our forests, swamps, and even cities were home to unknown, possibly dangerous creatures. You'd have panic, disruption to tourism, even environmental regulations changing to protect cryptid habitats. Governments love stability, and cryptids, well, they're the opposite of that. Let's go back to Mothman for a second. You remember the Silver Bridge collapse, right? 46 people died in that disaster, and to this day, some people believe Mothman was involved. Maybe he was a harbinger of doom, or maybe something even stranger. But here's where it gets interesting. Right after the collapse, the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant stopped almost entirely. Was the Mothman really just a myth that disappeared after the tragedy? Or was there a deliberate effort to hush up future sightings, keep the panic from spreading, and keep Mothman in the realm of local legend rather than actual threat? Fast forward to today, and what do we have? People reporting Mothman all over Chicago, and yet barely a peep about it from the mainstream media. It's not just because it's a weird story. There are credible witnesses, police officers, and even government employees who have come forward, and yet silence. Could it be that these sightings are being deliberately suppressed? And it's not just Mothman. Take the Jersey Devil. This cryptid has been around since the 1700s, but every time there's a major sighting, it seems to get swept under the rug. In 1909, there was a massive wave of Jersey Devil sightings across New Jersey. Newspapers were filled with reports, panic was spreading, schools were closing, and local authorities were in over their heads. But what happened after that? The story just disappeared, and any mention of the Jersey Devil in official channels was suddenly treated like a joke or a hoax. Convenient, right? Some researchers believe there's a pattern here. Whenever a cryptid sighting starts to gain too much attention, the government steps in to muddy the water, so to speak. They either discredit the witnesses, suppress the reports, or, in some cases, confiscate evidence. Think I'm reaching? There are plenty of stories of people who claim they've had evidence, footage, photographs, even physical samples taken from them by government officials. One man in South Carolina claims that after he captured a clear video of the lizard man near Scape or swamp, men in black suits, because of course it's always black suits, showed up at his door and took the tape, telling him it was for his own good that he didn't speak about it. Sounds like something out of a movie, right? Except these stories keep popping up, and they're eerily consistent. The idea is that if you keep these creatures relegated to folklore and myth, then no one takes them seriously and no one looks deeper. It's the perfect cover-up. And it's not just the U.S. either. Governments all over the world have a history of burying or manipulating stories that could cause too much disruption. Look at the Russian government's handling of sightings of the Almas, a Yeti-like creature in Siberia, or the Australian government's dismissive attitude toward the bunyip, a water monster reported in the outback for centuries. Wherever you go, it seems like someone, somewhere, is working to keep cryptids hidden in plain sight. And here's the thing. Governments aren't exactly shy when it comes to studying the weird and unexplained. They've had programs for remote viewing, telekinesis, and UFO research, all under the guise of national security. Is it really that far-fetched to think they might also be keeping tabs on cryptid sightings? I mean, if these creatures are real and they have some sort of biological or technological advantage that we don't understand yet, wouldn't that be of interest to the military, to scientists, to intelligence agencies? There's a well-known theory that cryptids could be linked to classified government experiments. Think about it. What better way to test the limits of genetic manipulation, cloning, or even interdimensional travel than in remote, isolated areas where few people venture? The lizard man, for example, fits the profile of a creature that could have been the result of some sort of biological experiment gone wrong, or right, depending on how you look at it. Is it really that hard to imagine a secret lab somewhere deep in the swamp, hidden from public view, where these experiments could be taking place? The bigger question is, if the government is hiding something, why? Is it simply to avoid public panic, or is there a darker motive at play? Could it be that some of these cryptids possess knowledge or abilities that are too valuable to reveal, or, as some speculate, are cryptids being used for something, whether as part of secret military programs, bioweapons research, or something else entirely? We might not have all the answers right now, but the more we dig into these sightings, the clearer it becomes that someone is trying to keep us in the dark. And if history has taught us anything, it's that the truth always has a way of coming to light, eventually. Okay, folks, now we're really taking a left turn into the realm of the weird and wonderful. You might be thinking, all right, Bennett, cryptids are strange enough as is. Now you're telling me they're connected to the paranormal? Yep, that's exactly what I'm saying. Strap in, because this is where the rabbit hole goes deep. Let's start with a simple question. What if cryptids aren't just physical creatures? What if there's something more? Something not of this world? There's a growing theory in the cryptid research community that creatures like the Mothman, the Jersey Devil, and the Lizard Man might not be purely biological entities. Instead, they could be interdimensional beings, paranormal entities, or even manifestations of supernatural forces. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but stay with me. First off, let's talk about Mothman, because he's one of the best examples of this crossover between cryptids and the paranormal. In many of the original sightings from the 1960s, witnesses reported not just seeing a physical creature, but also experiencing feelings of dread, nausea, and even visions of impending disaster. It's almost as if Mothman wasn't just a winged creature flying around. He was a harbinger of something bigger, maybe even a supernatural force that could manipulate human emotions. Some theorists believe that Mothman isn't an animal at all, but an interdimensional being that pops into our reality when certain conditions are met. These conditions could be linked to energy shifts, environmental factors, or even human consciousness. Wild, right? And it's not just Mothman. The Jersey Devil has a long history of being associated with witchcraft and curses, which blurs the line between cryptid and paranormal entity. Remember the story of Mother Leeds? She supposedly cursed her 13th child, and instead of giving birth to a human baby, she brought the Jersey Devil into the world. That's not your typical cryptid origin story. It's steeped in supernatural lore, which raises the question, is the Jersey Devil a physical creature that roams the Pine Barrens, or is it something more spiritual, tied to dark energy, or even demonic forces? There's another theory out there that links cryptids to the idea of window areas. These are locations where the veil between dimensions or realities is supposedly thinner, allowing creatures from other realms to slip through into our world. Many cryptid sightings occur in isolated remote areas, dense forests, swamps, mountain ranges, places that seem to have an otherworldly vibe all on their own. Could it be that these creatures are slipping into our dimension from another, where they're perfectly normal? Or better yet, are they slipping back and forth between realities, which is why they're so elusive and hard to track? Now, let's talk about the lizard man. On the surface, he seems like your run-of-the-mill swamp monster. Big, scaly, probably smells like algae. But there's more to his story than meets the eye. Some witnesses who have encountered the lizard man describe feeling an overwhelming sense of fear, almost as if they were being psychically attacked. Others have reported strange lights in the sky, electronic disturbances, and even seeing the lizard man vanish into thin air. That doesn't sound like a typical creature sighting to me. It sounds more like something out of a ghost story or a UFO encounter. Speaking of UFOs, here's where things get even weirder. There's a long history of UFO sightings being linked to cryptid encounters. Take the Skinwalker Ranch, for example, a hotbed of paranormal activity, UFO sightings, and you guessed it, cryptid encounters. People who have spent time at the ranch have reported seeing all sorts of strange creatures, from large, shadowy figures to wolf-like beasts that seem impervious to bullets. And what often follows these sightings? UFOs, orbs of light, and strange electromagnetic phenomena. It begs the question, are cryptids somehow linked to extraterrestrial or interdimensional activity? Are they scouts, guardians, or perhaps byproducts of these phenomena? There's no shortage of theories, but one thing's for sure. The overlap between cryptid sightings and paranormal activity is too consistent to ignore. But here's where things get truly mind-bending. Some researchers believe that cryptids might not be creatures at all in the traditional sense. Instead, they might be thought forms, also known as tulpas. The idea behind a tulpa is that if enough people believe in something, they can bring it into existence. Now, before you write that off as woo-woo nonsense, consider this. We know that human consciousness is powerful. We've seen examples of mass hysteria where large groups of people experience the same hallucinations or delusions at the same time. We've also seen cases where people manifest physical symptoms simply by believing they are sick. So, what if cryptids are the result of collective belief? Think about it. If generations of people have told stories about the Jersey Devil, the Mothman, or the Lizard Man, could they have inadvertently created these creatures through sheer force of will? Could these cryptids be born out of human fear, belief, and imagination, taking on physical form because enough people believe they exist? It's a strange thought, but when you consider the way these sightings ebb and flow with public attention, it starts to make a weird kind of sense. Now, whether cryptids are interdimensional travelers, supernatural entities, or the products of our collective imagination, one thing is clear. They're not just simple animals hiding in the woods. There's something much bigger at play here. something that suggests these creatures exist in a space between reality and myth, between the physical and the paranormal. And the more we look into it, the more connections we find between cryptids and the unexplained. Of course, the question remains, what does this mean for us? If cryptids are tied to paranormal forces, what does that say about our world and about the nature of reality itself? Are these creatures just anomalies, or are they part of a larger tapestry of strange phenomena that we're only beginning to understand? And what's more, if we acknowledge the paranormal aspects of cryptids, does that open the door to even stranger possibilities? Are there other beings, other dimensions, just waiting to be discovered? It's enough to make your head spin. All right, let's take a breath here. After all the strange stories, eerie sightings, and government cover-ups, you might be wondering, where do we go from here? Is it even possible to get to the bottom of the cryptid mystery, or are we just chasing shadows? Well, buckle up, because cryptid research is far from over. In fact, with the technology we have today, we're on the brink of uncovering more than ever before. Now, cryptid research used to be a pretty niche field, limited mostly to adventurous souls with a strong interest in folklore and maybe a little too much time on their hands. But today, things have changed. What was once the domain of amateur enthusiasts has become a serious, organized effort, with advanced tools and techniques coming into play. First off, let's talk about the game changers, drones. I'm not talking about your basic off-the-shelf drones for spying on your neighbor's backyard barbecue. I'm talking about high-tech, military-grade drones that can cover vast rugged terrain in ways humans never could. Dense forests, swamps, mountains. These are places where cryptids are believed to hide, and they're also places that are incredibly difficult for researchers to explore on foot. But with drones, researchers can scan large areas from the sky using thermal imaging to pick up heat signatures that might reveal the presence of something unusual. Imagine what that means for Bigfoot hunters. Instead of trudging through the woods hoping for a glimpse of something in the distance, they can now send up a drone to scan miles of forest in just a few hours. If there's a large, heat-emitting figure moving through the trees, the drone will pick it up, even if it's hiding in dense cover. We're talking about real-time surveillance, folks. Something that could radically change the game when it comes to finding these elusive creatures. And it's not just thermal imaging. We're also seeing advances in DNA testing that could help prove or disprove the existence of cryptids once and for all. In recent years, scientists have begun using environmental DNA, or eDNA, to track animal populations. This process involves collecting samples from the environment, things like water, soil, or even air, and testing them for trace amounts of DNA left behind by living organisms. In theory, researchers could use eDNA to find evidence of cryptids in their natural habitats. Imagine scooping up a bit of swamp water and discovering reptilian DNA that doesn't match any known species. You don't have to catch the lizard man to prove he exists. You just need to find traces of him. Of course, the big challenge here is credibility. Cryptid research has long been brushed off by mainstream science as little more than pseudoscience, and that skepticism isn't going away anytime soon. But that's starting to change, thanks in part to technology. As more sophisticated tools become available, we're seeing more serious researchers and even some scientists getting involved in cryptid investigations. With hard data, whether it's thermal imaging, DNA samples, or high-resolution drone footage, there's potential to turn cryptid research from a fringe activity into a legitimate scientific pursuit. But the tech revolution isn't the only factor at play here. We're also seeing a shift in how cryptids are viewed in popular culture. More people are open to the idea that there's still a lot we don't know about the natural world. Cryptids are no longer seen as just fantasy creatures. They're seen as potential missing links in our understanding of biology, evolution, and even history. Shows like Finding Bigfoot or Expedition Unknown have made cryptid hunting more mainstream, and the surge in public interest has fueled more research efforts. There's money and resources being poured into these investigations now, from crowdfunding campaigns to private research groups. And then there's the citizen science movement. Today, anyone with a smartphone and an internet connection can contribute to cryptid research. People are out there setting up trail cams, recording strange sounds in the woods, and uploading their findings online for others to analyze. With thousands of eyes and ears out there in the field, it's becoming harder and harder to dismiss cryptid sightings as isolated events. The collective power of the internet means that any credible piece of evidence can go viral, spreading awareness and drawing more attention to the cause. So while the government might be trying to suppress information, as we discussed earlier, the people are pushing back, and they're doing it with data. But here's the million-dollar question. What happens if we finally prove that cryptids are real? What if someone gets that crystal clear footage of the Jersey Devil, or a solid DNA sample from a lizard man sighting? What happens when the undeniable proof hits the mainstream? For starters, it would be a massive shakeup in the scientific community. Cryptids, long considered mythical or impossible, would suddenly be thrust into the realm of biological study, and that could change everything we know about our world, our history, and our understanding of evolution. Think about it. If creatures like the Mothman or Bigfoot are real, what else might be out there? What other mysteries have we yet to uncover? It would open the door to new possibilities, not just in cryptozoology, but in other fields like anthropology, archaeology, and even physics. Remember, if cryptids are real, and some of them have paranormal or interdimensional connections, that would force us to rethink our entire worldview. The implications are enormous. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. As exciting as the future of cryptid research is, we're not there yet. For now, these creatures remain elusive, just beyond the edge of what we can prove, and maybe that's part of the appeal. There's something thrilling about the chase, about the mystery that keeps us looking over our shoulders when we're out in the woods at night. Cryptids represent the unknown, the possibility that there's still magic left in the world, and that's something worth holding on to. The future of cryptid research is wide open. With the right tools, the right mindset, and maybe a little bit of luck, we might be on the brink of the biggest discovery in modern history. But even if we never catch a lizard man or spot the Mothman perched on a building, the search itself is what keeps us going. Because at the end of the day, the hunt for cryptids isn't just about finding strange creatures, it's about finding the truth in a world that still has so many secrets left to uncover. Now that's where we're heading with cryptid research, but we're far from done. Keep your eyes on the skies and your cameras ready, because you never know when something unexpected will make itself known. The unknown is always closer than we think. And that, my friends, is where we'll leave it for today. We've covered a lot of ground, everything from Mothman's aerial adventures to the possibility of government cover-ups, and even the paranormal connections lurking beneath the surface of these cryptid sightings. Whether you're a firm believer, a curious skeptic, or somewhere in between, one thing's for sure. The world is still a strange and mysterious place, full of unanswered questions and unseen creatures just waiting to be discovered. Now, Before you head off into the woods with your trail cams and thermal drones, do me a solid. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to hit that like button, share it with your fellow cryptid enthusiasts, and leave a review wherever you're listening, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or that weird app your cousin swears is better than all the rest. Your support helps keep this show going, and who knows, maybe one of your shares will reach someone who has the proof we've all been waiting for. Remember, the hunt for the truth never stops, and neither does broadcasting seeds. So stay curious, keep asking the hard questions, and always keep an eye on the shadows. You never know what might be lurking just out of sight. Until next time, I'm Bennett Tanton, and this has been Sasquatch Sunday on Broadcasting Seeds. Stay safe, stay skeptical, and I'll catch you in the next episode.
I got bad thoughts that make my mind scared, hold me hostage and they don't fight fair. Who gon' pray for me and wipe all my tears? Who gon' save me if you not right here? Move this darkness and make my sight clear. Take me your way cause I don't like here. Ghosts of my past, they feeling the night air. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Drowning, I'm off the deep end. Apparitions of all my demons. All my thoughts are committing treason. All alone, who gon' hear me screaming? Manifestations of my fears. Regrets that stretched out for light years. Can almost touch the light, homie, it's right there. Body free but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All the lights are fading